All right, well, we're welcoming you back to the Ekklesiacast. Chris and myself, Jonathan, are here today, and going to just talk through Chris's message yesterday, the start of our series on 1 Peter, and looking at the Peter's greeting in the book and some of the things we learned from that, and then talking a little bit about life groups today. So
yeah,
that exciting stuff that we're starting here at Ekklesia. So
yeah, and it's a cold day to start it.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody's experiencing that. It's been our first taste of winter. And so that's not bad. I mean, we're into mid-January. We've had our first taste of actual winter. It seemed like we've had this extended fall that we've been experiencing, and it seems like everybody's been enjoying. And then winter said, by the way, it is winter, and I'm going to come visit you now. So hopefully everybody's well. I know there's a lot of sickness going around. And so hopefully everybody's feeling better or on that road of health and getting themselves back and so forth.
Yeah.
But we're looking forward to this new series out of 1 Peter. It's been, as we were especially praying about what, as we end one series and begin a new series, it's at the ending of one series that we start to look forward, pray, think about what we need as a local fellowship, what the Lord's doing in us, and then allow him to kind of lead us into that next series. And so as I was praying about it, being given the task by the other elders to kind of come up with the series and do all this kind of background work, praying about it, thinking about where we are as a local fellowship, what's going on in our world. It just seemed like the Lord kept bringing me back to 1 Peter and kind of the message of this book, this want Peter had to encourage these believers in the midst of the persecution that they were facing. And it seemed to fit kind of what we're seeing in the days to come, not immediate days, but in the days to come in the life of the church in America. Like we're stepping into a time, kind of moving further into a time when that persecution is going to, I think, come to us in more ways than probably in our previous history. And we just have to equip ourselves for it. And I think this is a great study to do that, to recognize the hand of the Lord in the midst of life and how he uses that to accomplish his purpose in life. And so that was kind of the background and the thinking that kind of drew us to this book. And then once you get into it, as I mentioned, like on Sunday, just giving a simple outline of the book for people just to see the different headings, kind of the thoughts that are there, and how a very large portion of the book deals with loving your enemies and how we are to truly love them as God intended us to allow our lives to be used by the Lord to show people that God loves them and that through the gospel they can have life and that abundantly. And it's such a good reminder because we're living in such times that we find that what we want to do is fight our enemies. And we're in such, political tension and conflict, social tension and conflict, which pits people against one another. And there's such anger and hostility that seems to be, surrounding our body politic, our society, our economics. And, we're put into the mix of that. And it's just a great reminder to remember, our job isn't to fight or to flee. Our job is to stand and be faithful and go through. And in the midst of being mocked or ridiculed or shamed, to be able to actually love people in response to that. And so it just, what a great reminder for us as we want to see the gospel kind of permeate, go through our community as we're scattered throughout it. So this series just seems so well suited for that at this stage of our life as a fellowship, to be mindful of these things that, God's going to use us and wants to use us in all these different ways scattered around this community as we're scattered out into this place. So, just pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited about what the Lord's going to do with this and how he's going to use it in our lives. As well, we thought another good thing, and we think this is a good thing in teaching. So, there's, usually a variety of ways in which we can approach a teaching schedule or calendar. And we think just going through, books of the Bible is a really healthy way to equip the saints. Like this is also a general equipping, and not only equipping them with the truth of what the book says and how they can apply it to their life, but it's also equipping them with how to understand, to study the word and do their own study of the word. Like indirectly, we are teaching them by our handling of the word as elders, how they can handle the word. Like it's not that they're going to do these in-depth studies and outline a message and do the homiletics that we do of how we communicate. Homiletics is the art of communicating a message, putting it in sermonic form so that others can hear it. So we're not talking about teaching you homiletics. We are talking, though, about teaching you how to study. And indirectly, as you see us come forward with a message and give you the little cues, the tips, the different ways in which we approach it, it allows you to see, oh, I see how you got that. I see what this is. And it indirectly equips equips any congregant to begin to study the word. And we think that's super valuable because we want you to read the word and we want you to study the word. And we find value in both. And study just takes more time. Reading can be very quick, relatively speaking, and very valuable. But oftentimes from your reading comes study. And I know you've...
I was just...
Right?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, because one of the things that you mentioned at the end of your message that his elders, and especially as elders leading small group, that we want to encourage our people to be doing is to be reading through the book every week. And I think that, like you said, it's good to be reading the word. And then that reading of the word, especially repetitive reading of the word, does prepare you then to study it because you begin to notice the things that are worthwhile exploring.
Right.
And you see Peter's main themes. You're like, oh, he like that word, the elect. So he uses that term a couple of different times throughout the book, and you might pick up on that, and see like, oh, so he's using it there, and he's using it in this way, and building this particular. I can't think of an example of that from the book of Peter at the moment, but he's building something off of this particular thing that he's talking about.
Right, like in chapter 2, I think maybe to what you're thinking in chapter 2, when he talks about we're this chosen nation, we're this elect nation, and we are to as a result of that, we are to display the glory. The excellency of this grace and proclaim that and so forth. And so absolutely right. That's, spot on we want to, as elders, both formally teach you in a very direct way, but then informally allow you to learn from us because as we talk about often, we are an example of what it means to be a follower of Christ. And so as a follower of Christ, we want you to study. We want you to study the word, and we want you to be able to handle it accurately, rightly dividing it in that sense. And we see that as such an important element of life today is for believers, that you're accurately handling the word. Because there has been, there can be over any given portion of time, any season of time in the life of the church, when there has been this twisting or turning of the word. And we just think the word is so foundational in our lives that if you handle it accurately, you really see not only the beauty of it, But more importantly, you see the beauty of the Lord through it, and you see who He is, and you allow Him to speak to you in such a marvelous way. So I think you agree with me, having taught enough in your life. One of the joys of shepherding is we get to teach, which means we get to study. And that's a joy. That's studying. We bring so many things happen in our study that we never bring to the pulpit because it's not relevant to what we're saying. Right. It's not relative to that homiletic way in which we're putting it together, but it's just a joy as you're thinking about stuff and processing it. And the different thoughts you have, and you just see the brilliance and the beauty of it. So it just a great joy. It is one of those, and that's why I appreciate the guys trust me with coming up with these sermon series, and it gives me an opportunity to just, dive into what I just so enjoy to do, and that is study the Word and let it be in its glory. It's just such a wonderful tool the Lord has left us with, that we have a privilege to communicate and share. So Sunday we did some background on Peter, on this letter, and then got into the first two verses. So we can maybe take this in a couple of parts. Yeah. We'll look at the background part first, then we'll look at the actual greeting. So the background to this is the thing that struck me in the background. Probably the big takeaway for me when I was looking at the background was what I mentioned on Sunday about how many believers identify with Peter. And the trait that they often identify with Peter in is his ability to stick his foot in his mouth. And it's really interesting how that really is a common way in which we think about Peter. That's me. I am like him because of that. And pointing out that what's really interesting is the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 4 recognized another trait in them that was far more significant. And it was, yes, he did speak with boldness, but what they saw was that the boldness by which he spoke was directly related to them having been with Jesus. And, I made the point that really, if you want to identify with Peter, the best thing you can do then is identify with that he'd been with Jesus. And if that's the way we identify ourselves, man, that's powerful. If we identify ourselves as with Jesus.
Yeah, and they were probably thinking, man, this guy is the same.
Right?
I mean, this sounds really crass, but didn't we just kill this guy? Didn't we just get rid of this? And now here he is, here's round two.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Just so remarkable that it's just interesting how we sometimes look at biblical characters and maybe don't identify with their virtues, but we identify with their vices. And I thought to myself as I was studying this, kind of thinking about it and kind of just walking through it, man, it's such an interesting dynamic we have sometimes as Christians. I find comfort that this guy, he's got a bunch of bad qualities like me. I feel good about myself. And it's why don't we look at the other side of that? No, this is the good quality that he has. And why don't I strive for that? Reach for that, which is far better. It's what a blessing as we strive after that. That's something greater and higher, where I'm moving myself to that. And that's one of those good things, one of those good ways in which we can look at biblical characters and maybe emulate them more than in a good way.
Yeah. And so this may be just going total sidetrack, but one of the things that you mentioned in the just referring to the people, right? They were described as elect exiles. One of the things I didn't catch was you talked about that term exile, and you mentioned that there was perhaps not a great translation of that word? What did you?
So that word, it's an interesting word how we translate it. And the English translation of exile of that word, maybe a better translation would be foreigner. That's why they use the word, I think the King James uses the word sojourner. Maybe the New American Standard might even use that term, sojourner. I'm not sure. But exiled implies, by our English use of it, that you've been banished from your country. Where foreigner has a little different nuance. As I use the example of myself going on mission trips to India, I'm a foreigner in India. I haven't been banished from America. I haven't been exiled to India. I'm going as a foreigner. I am temporarily living there, but my home is somewhere else. So foreigner seems to be a better way to think about this. Now, my suspicion, I don't know, but this is translation. I'm guessing the word dispersion is what caught, is like they connected. Okay, this is a dispersion. They've been pushed out. So they're exiled. They've been forced out. And that's why we'll go with the term exile. And so I'm guessing that's why they chose that term. Like they put that phrase together, and this is what translators do far better than I can, because they're far more equipped to do it than I. But that's what they debate and discuss and figure out in all these committees and ways in which they translate the word. They say, well, this word really has a range of meaning, and we think in this case, in this context, connected syntactically, like this is probably the best translation.
Yeah, so I would get there. Yeah.
That's how it would probably get there. And I'm sure that's my guess. That's my guess. Yeah. That they got this dispersion, and then exile because you dispersed, it's exiled. But so that's why I think foreigner is a better idea, because it really reveals kind of, I think, how the Lord sees us as these pilgrims. I think that's the way in bygone days that we would refer to ourselves as pilgrims, kind of wandering through this world. That's kind of the picture that we kind of get of this. But I think it's an amazing name that he gives them, the elect exiles of the dispersion. It's just, it's a beautiful way to frame it. It's paradoxical, right? Because elect gives you such an image of, this is beautiful. Like God chose me, and I'm part of his family, and there's safety and security. And he, we have the image of the Old Testament. He's a hen and we're under his wings. Like we're comforted and protected and secure and safe. And we have a home, and this is glorious and great and grand. And then he attaches it to exile. Like, now I'm a foreigner living in the, like, what? Wait a minute. What's that? So it really gives you that paradoxical. I love the way the scriptures do this. Like they give you these pieces sometimes that create these tensions. And this is a paradox. It's like, this just doesn't, it shouldn't be this way, but it is.
Yeah, especially if you had like a Jewish heritage, you would associate being elect with all of the blessings that are present in the Old Testament of, having land and security. And I know that that's not all Israel's history, but in part it's because of their sin. But then to hear that you're an elect exile, like to put those two things together, like that doesn't seem to jive with what I would imagine as a Jewish person I would be thinking would be a good thing.
Right. And clearly, I mean, and that's why with First Peter, there's a rather significant discussion about who these believers are, because there is this Jewish flavor that is found in the book. And so some say this is written to primarily Jewish believers. And it's difficult to really, stand firmly like, yeah, this is written to Jewish believers. And because there's just so much, the language in it. Peter, again, isn't a trained theologian. So his language is a little different. And it's just wide range. It's very wide range. He uses terms and concepts and ideas that aren't exclusive to Judaism. So it's probably unlikely that it's solely a Jewish group. probably a mixed group. But it's Peter, and Peter has a Jewish background. I didn't bring it out on Sunday, but even his use of the verb. So interesting in Paul's gathering, in Paul's greetings, he never uses a verb in his greetings. It's supplied in our English translations. He'll just say grace and mercy, or grace and peace, whatever it might be. Grace, love, and peace, whatever virtues he'll just mention. But Peter used the Old Testament, and primarily out of the book of Daniel, the Old Testament form of having that multiplied upon you and supplied the verb. Which, and again, I didn't bring this out on Sunday, but what that shows you, what that indicates to especially to his readers, was he was concerned more about their spiritual well-being than he was about their physical well-being. As he expanded this greeting in this very wonderful way to show the triunity of God, he was really emphasizing that he was concerned for them spiritually and not physically, which again is kind of interesting when we think about it, how often if people are being persecuted or suffering because of their identification with Christ, how we might pray for that removal rather than their spiritual well-being in the midst of that. And that's what Peter was primarily concerned with. The other thing that's fascinating me with the letter, and I'm sure people as they start to read this, they'll notice it, he doesn't ask to be taken out of this. He doesn't get into the information of we have to get out of this. We have to keep doing this. Here's how you live in the midst of it, but you don't, he doesn't say, Lord, relieve it, get us out of it. You'll just carry us through it. You will bring us to the other side of it. You'll sustain us in it. So it's really fascinating to me when you read it, how different it is. What, if you think about praying for people who are being persecuted, really instructive to how to pray for people who are being persecuted. Not to pray for release, but to remain strong and faithful in the midst of it, in the face of it. And I know that can sound hard to people, aren't you concerned? And it's well, we are concerned, but we realize that God's grace is, that Jesus Christ is the cornerstone of our life. And if the path before us is a path of persecution for a period of time, then he will give us the grace to sustain us through that. And we can actually thrive and grow and develop in that. And I know that's hard for a generation of believers in America that are being bombarded with the singular thought that safety is the highest form of love that we could show people. We have to keep people safe, so we must do this to keep them safe. And it's the gospel has kept us safe. There's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. We are as safe as we're going to be. So we're good. We're secure.
Yeah, and it's I think I've used this illustration before, but when I was in seminary, we'd have regular chapel, and they would invite in local area pastors and missionary guests. And there was one week where I walked in the chapel, and there were these 4 or 5 men that walked in. You could tell that they were foreigners. The way they just were as a group, it was just different. So anyway, one of the seminary professors introduced the guy's name and said he was from Russia. And then the guy gets up there, and two guys get up there. One, this guy from Russia, and the other, his translator. And he started off. I remember, it didn't sink in right away what he said, but started off saying, you are in seminary in Minneapolis. He was like, but I went to seminary in a Soviet gulag. And I was like, what did he just say? And then I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. And then he described, years he spent in prison, and in a gulag for his faith, for it's indescribable, the things that he went through. And I was, in seminary, you do get these kind of woe is me moments where you're like, this is just awful. I don't want to be here. Like this, like school is, and I was in the middle of one of those seasons, a month or so of just like, man, this is just tough. And I'm so tired and I don't want to do this. And then when he said that, I was just like, oh, well, that puts things into perspective.
Right.
And because I was just, Lord, help me get out of this Hebrew test or whatever it was. Right. And here he's like, help me be able to return home to my family so I can start preaching again in my local church so I can be thrown back into prison.
Right.
Right. And I was like, well, that's, the Lord, it is just, like you said, is a simple illustration that we do get rather comfortable in the United States with thinking that, that God's grace, God's peace always takes one particular form of comfort and ease, rescue out of situations that are bad. And that's not all the time the way that it works.
Right. And it's not all the time that you're in persecution either. It's like, the Old Testament is filled with examples where the children of Israel would have decades of peace, and then there would be a whole turbulence that would come upon them. So it's not like we're saying, okay, because we're America, in the past, we've never been persecuted, and we weren't persecuted because we weren't living the faith. Like, no, that's not at all what we're saying. We were living the faith then. We were just under the Lord was blessing us in a way that allowed us to do remarkable things, accomplish many, many ways in which the gospel was going forward and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with God giving us tranquil seas to minister in. And so, hey, thank you, Lord, for our heritage. But to expect that that's the norm and not thank him now for the turbulence that we're beginning to feel and increasingly feel, because we're identifying with him and we're being persecuted, like, hey, this is what happens. And so now we need to be equipped in a different way. And, a peacetime army is equipped one way, and a wartime army is equipped another way. And I don't know, I could be wrong, so I accept that. But I think the Lord's equipping an army right now for a wartime army. I think we got to be equipped, and it's because we have to fight and understand. For us, I believe the fight of the battle is to love our enemies. It isn't to punch them in the face; it's to hold their face. So that's a different fight.
Yeah, and so this goes back to the question I was going to ask earlier. That kind of got lost in our discussion. Was, and maybe this is a discussion we'll probably return to later when we get into that section on loving our enemies. So you had mentioned some of the highly politicized environment in which we live, where you're one tribe or the other. There's no in between, and we're gonna do whatever it takes for our side to win. Do you have suggestions for believers in terms of how to navigate that reality, like especially in the midst of conversation where you find yourself at work and you're in the middle of a discussion, and somebody asks you, like, well, are you believing that? Like, are you aligned with XYZ political leader? Like, do you really agree with that? And you're like, well,
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really good. I guess what I would begin to say on that, because I think that's a really good subject to talk about. Today, you really need to define issues. And I think we as believers have to first listen and try to listen to people and understand what they're saying, not just the rhetoric of what they're saying. And I think we get sometimes lost in the emotional response to the rhetoric. We hear something and we don't really probe what they mean by it. And so I think that's where it begins. We need to, as believers, be wiser and more discerning as we're listening to people and not be as concerned with just telling people. And I think this is what happens. We talk by each other because we're too quick to tell and say they're wrong. Yes, we know they're wrong. So we're not saying you adopt their position. We're saying you understand why they think the way they do, which then usually opens the door for you to drop seeds of truth into their life. Things that they may have never considered. Because I think the second thing we have to be aware of is we have generations now growing up, generations, where they have no foundation of life. There is no biblical worldview they have in their life. They are just thinking about life from their perspective, and the echo chamber they're living in is life from their perspective. So we just have to now begin to sprinkle. We have to really return to what Jesus did. And Jesus so often used simple illustrations of life and teaching to just sow seeds into their head. And then many times people would come back to him and say, I need to hear more of that. So, to me, it's the proverbial, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right?
Yeah.
But you can make them thirsty to want to drink. So if we are truly the salt of the earth, then just make people thirsty. And I think the start of that is to listen to them and then try to understand why do you believe that? And then start the process of pointing out the incongruities and inconsistencies of their beliefs. Not in a bombastic way, but in a genuine way, wanting to get them to the gospel. So I think it takes a little more time with people to be able to find out what that is. And I'm convinced some people don't know why they believe what they believe, or they haven't really thought it through and they don't see the inconsistencies. And when it's pointed out to them, they realize, oh, yeah, that is inconsistent. That isn't congruent with this other thought I have. And I think that's what, personally, I believe, as New Tribes Missions has done for years, with people groups who have never been exposed to biblical truth, they use the creation story as the narrative to really lead people to this gospel journey. And I'm pretty convinced, because people don't know how they got here and why they're here. I think those two foundational questions, who am I and why am I here, are so real today in people. This is so palpable in their lives that we have to bring them back to the Genesis story of, there's God. I think this is the basic starting point, that there's God. And you have to start there. Like, there is a God. And he's the true and the living God. And they have no concept of that. And so they're trying to construct life without that. So I think we have to get them back to that point. And that's why I think you need to, I guess I would start with that. Like, listen to people and talk to them and ask questions. And on the one side is you're communicating. On the other side, equip yourself with, I think, a foundational understanding of creation because I think those opening 3 chapters of Genesis are so valuable. And also equip yourself with an understanding of the philosophical framework of the world in which we're living.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to understanding the culture, like understanding Paul did it in Acts 17. Clearly, he understood Greek culture, and he used it to communicate truth. And we as believers, we have some wonderful Christian writers who are great expositors of our current age that, can communicate the framework of this world, of how they're thinking and why they're thinking. And it's worth for us as believers to understand some of that. Again, not everyone will appreciate that, but we should understand. We should all have a basic understanding of it, of what is the philosophical underpinning that's moving people today. And so I think that's, worthwhile to spend some time in.
Yeah.
A writer that was, I know in my life, 2 writers that were, I'm going to forget the one guy's name. You might remember him. One was Os Guinness. So this is going back about 10, 15 years. And Os Guinness was just a great writer, a great commentator of our age and kind of what was going on. And the other one was, he wrote a trilogy of books about the church and its transformation in our society. I forgot his name. I've got my books in my office and I could see him with my mind's eye. And I'm getting the name Charles Taylor in my head. But he wrote a book called, Again, I'm forgetting the name of that book. But anybody who knows the name Charles Taylor is going to remember the name of the book, Secular something. It's just, if you really want to dive into it deeply, I would say that book by Charles Taylor is an excellent book to get. It's a very thick book. Well, you have to slog through it, but it's super good. Super good book. And there's one other book that I just finished reading that is super good, that, kind of touches on some of these topics. And it is called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman.
Yeah, I've read that. That's the short. So he's got 2 volumes. That's the shorter of the 2. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think I read that I'm not a super fast reader. I think I read that though in like 2 days. It was very, very well written. It's a little, it's not like a novel, so you're not reading it, something like that. But it was pretty easy read. And then he's got a bigger volume. I think that was based off of, I can't remember the name of that book. I haven't picked up. And that one was really good.
This one super. So this one, I'm not sure if this is the bigger volume, because this one was 400 pages.
Yeah, that probably is the. I'm trying, man. That now I'm going to be the one that's forgetting titles of books.
So, and this one is I would say it is one of the. If you're really interested in trying to get a sense of how we got here, this book will give you that sense. You have to go slow through it, take your time. And it's just so super valuable. So
that, the one that you're talking of is the longer edition, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And then he also has A Strange New World, which is the book I read, which from what I understand is it's a little easier read than The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. But both of those books are highly recommended.
Right. So that book, like I said, is just a super good way to kind of get a sense on kind of how we got here in a non-polemic way, in a more teaching way, just to kind of learn. But
and I mean, Carl Truman has, it's been a long time since I've looked at his stuff, but he used to have a podcast that he would do somewhat on topics like this, sometimes veering into other stuff. But
right.
I mean, he's written a lot on these issues. So
and that's why I said there's so many resources out there that you could just grab a hold of.
I mean, even Al Mohler has his briefing podcast that usually covers 2 to 3 issues every day that are going on in culture.
Is a cultural comment. He's making a cultural commentary, a great example of a resource that you could just use that will just help you not, beat up somebody, but to understand them so you can communicate them. And that's what Jesus did. Jesus understood people. And so he tried, as he reasoned with them, as he talked to them, he was trying to reach them, not beat them up. And I think we've got this attitude, I think sometimes in Christianity, that I have to I have to beat people up. Like I have to show them they're wrong and I'm right. You don't need to show them anything. The Holy Spirit will do all the work that needs to be done to bring them to the Lord. You have to be the vessel through which the Lord's going to work, which means it's going to require us to be equipped. And so in one sense, we need to be equipped for that age in which we live. And I think that's, if we get back to our question, like how can we help believers? I think that's the way we can do that. Like we can learn that. I think the final thing we can say here is, which hopefully believers do now, we regularly pray for one another. Like we need to be able to reach out and pray and actively pray and be so engaged in community that when I have opportunity to talk to someone, I'm asking people to pray real time, like pray for me, I'm going to talk to this person. Pray for me, I'm going to reach out to my coworker. Pray for me this week on my job because there has been persecution and I find myself in this tension and I want to respond rightly to this. I mean, that's what we do in community. That's what we do together with each other. So we ask people to pray. Again, I hope believers understand this. Just because you're being persecuted, maybe for your faith in your job, doesn't mean you leave your job. Maybe it means that you just stay in your job and go through it. Like, do you understand that your life is being used for something greater than your career? And maybe the Lord just wants to use your life that way so that he can accomplish his purpose. I just think as believers, we just sometimes adopt these ideas that, well, this isn't good. This isn't a Christian environment, so I want to get out of here. And it's like, well, maybe that's not what the Lord wants. So we pray, asking the Lord to direct our steps. I'll give you an example from my life. I've used this a number of times, but it hits this point exactly. When I was going to seminary, I didn't want to work in a restaurant. I told the Lord, I'm not working in a restaurant. I'm done. I've worked in a restaurant. I don't want to do that work. I'm done. And the Lord did not open a job for me anywhere. And I remember I was having this interview with a company that was very close to the seminary that did commercial laundry and supplied businesses with rugs and those kind of things and so forth. And I was sitting with the guy interviewing with him, and he looked at my resume. I had a nice, that was back in the day when you actually walk with a piece of paper and say, here's my resume, here's what I've done. And he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, okay. And he said, why aren't you looking for a job in a restaurant? And I kid you not, it was like the Holy Spirit was sitting right there in front of me. And I'm like, I'm not working at a restaurant. Like, Lord, I was having a conversation through this guy with the Lord. And I left that interview, and I remember saying to myself, okay, Lord, I get it. If you want me to work in a restaurant, I'll do what you want me to do. Everything's on the table. The next day, the restaurant I worked at for 5 years, an ad was in the paper. I got that job. I was there for 5 years, ministering the gospel to those people. And I'm just like, that's the Lord. Like, realize just because you're going through something maybe hard at work, recognize maybe the Lord is using you. And so he doesn't want you just to leave because you want to get a new career, or you don't like this, or you want to be in a Christian environment. Maybe that's not what the Lord wants. So you pray and you let the Lord lead you. And then if the Lord leads you, great. But again, remember as you pray that you're also talking to other believers and you're asking them and you're engaging in this process of thinking through, like, what should I do? And I'm just thinking maybe we're missing something in our life, in the way we frame life, not to see the Lord in the midst of that.
Yeah, I've told this story too several times. Is in my riding group, I had a run-in with a guy where we had a very difficult on the bike discussion about homosexuality and the issues surrounding that. And I mean, his central premise with me is essentially your church is going to go down in history as just being, go the way of the dinosaurs kind of a thing. Anyway, we had, it was mostly coming from him. It was a very intense conversation. And then, he's a regular guy that rides with our group. So I'm like, man, the argument was so intense that several guys came to me afterwards and were like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, I hope that doesn't scare you away from coming back out. I was like, no, it's par for the course. It's, and the temptation is like the very next ride was, I'd rather just stay home than take another beating like that. Like I would rather not have to endure an hour and a half of not only suffering on the bike, but suffering someone else berating me the whole time I'm on the bike. And it showed up the next week and we had a perfectly normal conversation and talked about other issues that didn't hit on that particular one that we had an argument about before. But the Lord just gives you opportunities to continue to minister, and running is very often not the right solution to those issues. So, yeah.
Charles. So,
yeah, you got
right. Charles Taylor's "A Secular Age," written. He's a Catholic theologian, written a number of years ago. It is just a really good work if you're interested in kind of walking through it. And I think the other guy that I was thinking of,
and that one, that's like got a brown cover on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
yep.
I have that book. Yeah.
There are some primers. They've got some they've got some other ones. Some have written commentaries on that work. They've kind of synthesized his thoughts and so forth and done it. But that's the one if you want to kind of walk through it, you can do it. And the other guy I think is David Wells. He has written a series of books, goes back to the 90s. One of those books is No Place for Truth, Whatever Happened to Evangelical Theology. And I believe there's about 3 or 4 books in that series that he wrote over a period of time that was kind of bringing commentary onto our culture, which really helpful if you're interested in like walking through that. Those books are worth a read, worth to kind of do that and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of Google when
Yes.
your memory goes like, what is that book? I cannot remember that, what that book is. So, but those are some works that can do that. But it goes right to that point. Like you're in these conversations on these issues and you start to swim like, okay, I have to walk down this road. And how do I walk down this road having this discussion? And what I have found is that you really have to challenge people in their thinking, and probe people as to why they believe what they believe. What's the foundation for it, as you're engaging with it? And I think as long as we remain winsome, if we're gracious, then I think the Lord can use us in that, and allow us to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that greeting, if we can close on this with the greeting, that expansive greeting that, he brings this Trinitarian formula to these believers. Like he's showing the triune God is at work in your life. God the Father, the Spirit, the Son, like this is so beautiful as to what God is doing in our lives. And that's the headwaters of it all. Like we have to remember God is at work in our lives. And, I know as elders, we're always trying to get believers to see God is at work in your life. And so that's why sometimes when you come to us, we're not thinking of getting you out of a situation. We're trying to show you the God who's in the midst of the situation. And then he'll direct you where he wants you to go. Because he knows better than we do.
Which may be in certain scenarios out, and in certain scenarios it might mean staying. Right.
And that's why we're like, but we're saying you have to do what he wants you to do. And, so often, I know you've had this experience when you say that to believers, especially when they're in a tough spot, maybe because of their faith, they're in a tough spot. And you say, well, what does the Lord want you to do? And you just see sometimes the bewilderment, in part because they feel like they're overwhelmed by their situation. And we encourage them, and they are encouraged. Like, no, the Lord's in the midst of this. Like, you need to seek him. And then from that, we can figure out, like, we can then, like you said, counsel and give, help you walk through that and think that through as to what might be the path that you should take. We've done that, how many times with people, but that's why we say that to you. Like, what does the Lord want? And because we think that's what's important. Like, maybe the Lord will have you stay in this. Like, that could be a possibility. And we don't know. But, he does. And that's why I think that opening phrase that he used in that greeting, according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, is so beautiful, because that is God's that's the future. Like, the Lord knows our lives. So he knows what he's doing with our life. And he knows the beginning and the end of our lives and everything that goes in between that. And so, what a comfort to know, like, the Lord knows my future. And I mean by that, the immediate future in front of me. Like, he knows. He knows tomorrow, the day after that. And yes, it may be mundane and average and normal, like I think about it, but it could be something else. And if it is something else, what a comfort to know that God knows that. Like, he's aware of it. And he's allowed it. And to me, there's nothing more comforting than to know when you're going through something hard that God has allowed it. Because God's then in the midst of it. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I think, are a great example of that. Like, whether God does this or not, we don't know. Like, yeah, we could end up being burned in there. But you know what? We're just not doing that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there was like, and again, it wasn't Daniel's intent, but you do wonder, like, what were they doing as they were kind of walking around in that fire? Like, what was the God of ages who was walking with them? What were they talking about? That's what I wonder. Like,
In 2024, the Lions will win the playoff game. Sorry.
On the note to close.
Yeah, sorry.
On a note of victory. So, hey, and as we do close, we do, looking forward to next week in the startup of Ecclesia Life Groups. And if you haven't connected into one of them, no time like the present to get connected. It's a great way to get to know people and build community and allow the Lord to use your life in that way, which is what we're looking for, to see how the Lord can use us and build. And it's a great place to grow from and, walk in with each other, sharpen some of these skills as we have conversation with each other, all these good things that we've been talking about. We think this could be a pathway to bring about some of those things. So we're pretty excited about it, and we appreciate all the people that have signed up. And if you haven't done it, hey, feel free to reach out, and we'll get you hooked up into one of those groups and see how the Lord could use you.
Yeah. Amen. Look forward to being back together next week. See you then.